Please do not shoot anymore, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, good day. I'm delighted to welcome you at our traditional meeting dedicated to reviewing the outcomes of our foreign policy last year. The year was a quite demanding one. It was marked by increasing inequality in global growth and growing instability. The Middle East continued to boil. Of course, the gravest concern the gravest concern is the situation unfolding in Syria. The major terrorist acts have become all but everyday reality in this country and other states. The weapons are spread uncontrollably. The militants are infiltrating into Sahel zone. The situation in Mali is experiencing the consequences of what happened in Libya. The hostage-taking in Algeria has become an awakening call as well. And we couldn't move forward to the solution of problems of non-proliferation and the situation around Iranian nuclear problem, the nuclear problem of Korean Peninsula, and the situation on convening the conference on establishing the zone free from weapons of mass destruction in the Far East. The increasing role of power intends to solve one's own problems at the expense of others tended to be traced in the actions of individual members of international community. The global economy was shaken in Eurozone above all, and there was a continuous search for the options to overcome the consequences of the global economic crisis. Overall, it is evident that the world is undergoing a transition which is unprecedented even by historical standards and is accompanied by respective remaking of geopolitical landscape and shaping new lineup of powers. In this context, Russia has pursued a proactive, responsible and constructive foreign policy marked by its intent to coordinate joint actions globally, to strengthen security and stability in the world, to resolve conflicts and crises by painstaking search of reasonable trade-offs, as well as by its willingness to build a full-fledged dialogue and cooperation with all states. Our priorities were specified repeatedly in the statements by the President Putin in his article and in his decree dated May 7th, 2012, and the address by the President to the Federal Assembly on December 12th. In our actions, we were guided by the time-tested concepts of pragmatism, openness, multi-vector orientation, predictability, ambitious and firm promotion of national interests without confrontation. Our key task is to accomplish the objective set by the President Putin to contribute to wealthy and prospering Russia, to provide favorable external conditions for a long-term sustainable development of our country, for shifting its economy to innovation track supported by its unique resource base and huge human potential, and retrenching its position as an equal partner in global markets and in global affairs overall. We were consistent in trying to make intense use of opportunities of economic and science and technology cooperation with our foreign partners to solve our national tasks. As I see it, we are continuing strengthening positions of our country as one of the leading centers of power and influence in a polycentric system meeting the demands of realities and tasks of the 21st century. The very important track was the strengthening of integration process in CIS countries. It is our natural priority that helps to secure a well-deserved place for the CIS members in an increasingly complex and highly competitive world. This course was put into practice in a declaration on further development of comprehensive cooperation approved at the meeting of CIS Leaders Council in Ashgabat on December 5th, and in the adopted agreement on establishing an integrated currency market. There is no need to underscore again the importance of the Free Trade Zone Treaty within CIS. It is a very important step. We continue to build up the potential of CSTO as a multifunctional entity for responding to security challenges. We were strengthening the Eurasian Economic Community, and we took a decision to enter into force the Eurasian Economic Commission. And from starting on January 1st, 2012, a basic package of CES entered into force. And the Eurasian Economic Union will be launched from January the 1st, 2015. The integration group of 3 confirmed its openness for other participants from CIS countries, and first of all from the Eurasian Economic Community members. And it is based on the integration process in force in the European Union and on the WTO principles. All this leads us to assume that the objective set forward by the President of the Russian Federation, I mean the creating a single economic and human space from the Atlantic to the Pacific, is quite resolvable. And last year we continued to strengthen the CES, the Collective Security Treaty Organization, as a multilateral mechanism to respond to threats and challenges. We continued our efforts to develop bilateral cooperation with CIS countries, including our partners in Customs Union, Kazakhstan, Belarus, including Ukraine, including the Central Asia states and South Caucasus states. All our initiatives aimed at promoting the substantive agenda, which is a positive one, was aimed at joining efforts of all participants of international relations. This was our behavior in the United Nations, in G8, in G20, in BRICS. In 2013-2015, we will preside in G20, in SCO, in G8, and we will use these presidencies to strengthen our concerted efforts globally. The outcome of the Russia-EU summit in Brussels confirmed the serious potential of our strategic partnership that we already have in place. We have continued our work in energy sector as well. As you may know, the second stage of the Nord Stream gas pipeline was commissioned. We have put into practice the implementation of the South Stream, and our main priority is to switch to the non-visa-free regime. All the technicalities are solved, so we are waiting for our partners to react. The Euro-Atlantic security was of our primary concern, and the overall stability as well. We are interested in a constructive dialogue to develop a stable and mutually beneficial cooperation, especially in the areas of investment, trade and economic relations, and in the area of contacts between people. Last year, the agreement between Russia and the US came into force on facilitating the visa procedures for tourists and businessmen. We also set a goal, and I believe that our American colleagues will show a constructive approach to it, a goal to shift to the visa-free regime. Of course, we have difficult issues as well in our relations with our American colleagues. You remember the negative consequences after the adoption of odious sanctions law, which is Magnitsky Law, which substituted the Jackson-Vanik Amendment. In spite of all, we will respond to hostility actions, but the root of our position is willingness to further development of Russian and American links in all areas. We are interested in coordinating our efforts globally based on the fundamental principles of equality, mutual respect of our interests, and non-intervention in our internal affairs. This was the basis for developing our relations with NATO. In December, we had a ministerial meeting of the NATO-Russia Council. On the whole range of areas, we noted successful cooperation. But the shifting to a totally new level will be creation of an architecture of indivisible security in the Euro-Atlantic. Our proposals are known and they are already tabled. All our actions were based on the principle of the respect to rule of law, democratic norms in international relations, absence of alternative to the central role of the United Nations and its Security Council, and the inadmissibility to use the Security Council to legitimize the interference in domestic conflicts. We were guided by these principles in relation to the situation in the Middle East and North Africa, including Syrian crisis. We will contribute to the international efforts for peaceful settlement in Syria based on Geneva Accords without the attempts to rewrite and interpret those accords. They do not need interpretation. Everything is said clearly there. The parts have agreed to delegate their negotiators to develop the structure of a new governing body. We were trying to overcome the deadlock in the Middle East settlement. There is no progress in view here, but we believe that the efforts to assist the parties to resume their talks should be continued. A key element of strengthening our positions is the boosting our presence in the Asian and Pacific region, and the September summit, APEC summit in Vladivostok showed the seriousness of our plans and intentions. We appreciate that our partners supported our agenda that we proposed, and around 60 initiatives have been worked on by different specializing groups that are working within APEC.
We pay particular attention to the strengthening of our strategic partnership with China, India, Vietnam. We have been developing multilateral ties and cooperation with Korea and ASEAN and other countries of the region. We participated actively in multilateral mechanism in the Asia-Pacific region, including the Eastern Asia summits that play a major role in ensuring collective approaches to security strengthening in the region, and that role is going to increase. We are satisfied with our cooperation with our partners in Latin America and Africa. We have been pursuing specific projects in our relations with those countries. We also cooperated with multilateral organizations that are active in Africa and Latin America, first and foremost the African Union and CELAC, the Community of Latin American Countries and Caribbean countries. Our foreign policy should become more effective thanks to the use of so-called soft power, and our cooperation is playing an increasing role in this regard. We are cooperating with civil society, with non-governmental organizations and expert community in the framework of our Business Council at the Ministry and within the framework of Scientific Council within the framework of our ministry. And we cooperated with our Foreign Relations Committee and the Fund for the Support of Public Diplomacy and the Fund for supporting our compatriots abroad. We'll continue to work in all these areas and other areas as well. Fortunately, I didn't cover all of them due to the limit of time. We will be open to strengthening cooperation with everyone who is willing to do so based on equality and mutual benefit. And that concludes my statement, and I'm now ready to take your questions. Colleagues, your questions, please. Russia Today, your question. Sergey Viktorovich Vasilevin, Russian Alliance. March will mark 2-year anniversary of the beginning of the Syrian crisis. the efforts to promote dialogue between the parties have failed? Do you think anything could be done to improve the situation? And do you think that naval maneuvers in the Mediterranean are sort of a preparation for further developments? Well, as regards the maneuvers, such maneuvers are conducted on a regular basis. Our fleet, until very recently, was not able to conduct major journeys abroad, but maneuvers abroad. But now we believe that training is necessary for maintaining the combat readiness of our naval forces, air force, and therefore these maneuvers have become regular. This is nothing unusual. Our seamen are participating actively in combating piracy, and of course we are not interested in seeing the Middle East region being destabilized even further. Therefore, the presence of our fleet there is a factor for stability in the area. As regards your statement about the failure of attempts to bring the parties to negotiating table, unfortunately, we have not seen such attempts being made to bring all the parties to the table, to the negotiating table. Yes, we continue our efforts. We continue to meet all the Syrian parties involved, and our policy has remained the same all the time in our contacts with all the parties. We are trying to convince them in the need of complying with the Geneva Communiqué that all the parties have subscribed to, the 5 permanent members, the League of Arab Countries, Turkey, European Union, the United Nations, all have subscribed to that communiqué. But unfortunately, the other participants in that action group that was formed in Geneva are sending wrong signals, at least in their ties with the opposition. They have no contacts with the government, but the opposition takes advantage of their support for their irreconcilable position, which is that no talk should be conducted with the government. And the coalition that was established in Doha, the coalition of Syrian opposition, in their programmatic statement, stated that their goal is dismantling the regime, dismantling of its structures. This runs counter to the Geneva Accords, where we underscored the need to maintain the public structures and to avoid the mistakes that have been made in the region, in other countries of the region. And the opposition, represented by that national coalition, has refused to conduct talks, and our Western partners and some countries of the region welcome the establishment of that coalition. When we asked them why our partners welcomed this approach, the approach for refusing dialogue, they answered that the main thing was to unite them, the opposition forces, and after that, the Western countries and other participants in the process of Syrian settlement, afterwards we will convince the opposition to take a more constructive approach. Nothing like that is happening now. Regrettably, the opposition forces categorically reject any attempt to maintain dialogue, and they continue to be antagonistic, and our partners, unfortunately, are encouraging them and provide them with everything necessary to continue that struggle. So there have been no attempts to bring the parties to the negotiating table, as we have tried to do, as our Chinese colleagues have tried to do, and the special envoy of the United Nations and the Arab League countries, Kofi Annan, and Brahimi also tried to do that. But so far, I repeat, everything is blocked by the fanatical efforts of the opposition forces and their fanaticism in the intention to dismantle the regime. So their reconcilable position is maintained, and as long as it continues to be as this, nothing will happen. For us, our priority is not to pursue some geopolitical objective, such as dismantling the regime. Our priority is to stabilize the situation and to bring as soon as possible the situation to normalization and save the lives of Syrian citizens. But apparently our colleagues have different priorities. We are engaged in frank dialogue with them. They say they understand everything. They are aware of the threat of the disintegration of the Syrian state, but when they speak publicly, they put forward different ideas and thoughts, something that is quite different from what they tell us privately. France Press Agency, your question, please. The mic is off. The mic is off. Modern technologies fail. France Press Agencies, Sergey Viktorovich, is it true, as your French colleague stated, Russia offered its support to transport French forces to Mali, and what position Russia takes with respect to the Mali conflict? Well, I think that yesterday we did all we could to dispel any doubts on this question. When my colleague Roland Fabius telephoned me and he told me about the French view of the situation in Mali, and he expressed their gratitude for the expeditious action taken by the Security Council in support of the French reaction to the appeal by the Mali government to send French troops to the country to prevent separatists from taking power in that country. But he asked also whether there are any possibilities that Russia could offer in terms of transportation, and I answered literally as follows. I heard that our private companies, as Airbridge Cargo, Skoll, have concluded contracts with various parties, including French Defense Ministry and the Ministry of Interior of some African countries and the Procurement Office of the United Nations. And that is up to them. Those are commercial projects and nothing more. With respect to offering transportation services was discussed in our conversation. Our French colleagues, when this information appeared that you have referred to, they apologized to us. They said that that was a distortion of what was discussed in our telephone conversation. Well, our position, we outline it regularly. As I have already mentioned, we are concerned by the prospects for destabilization of Sahel region, and the instability is spilling over to that area from the Northern Africa. Those forces that oppose the French and African forces in Mali are those people who deposed the Gaddafi regime and who armed the forces opposing the Gaddafi regime, and therefore it is very important for us not to take a narrow approach to what we are witnessing now, because so far we are acting on an ad hoc basis. International community is acting on ad hoc. Whenever something happens in Yemen, we concentrate on Yemen. Then Tunisia, then Egypt, now Mali, Syria. Now it is important for us to raise our head, to look farther ahead over the horizon, and to analyze all these processes. They are interrelated and they contain many threats, including the threat of terrorism, Al-Qaeda and its partners, and this negative business and this odious business are taking very decisive efforts, and we're seriously concerned by various movements in the Islam world. This is an explosive situation, an explosive potential that is growing, and we have to do something about it. First, through the League of Arab Countries, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, we are in favor of all the Islamic countries standing in solidarity with the charges and avoid any split within that religion, very important world religion. So we hope that the situation in Mali will be stabilized eventually and that African countries in the near future will launch their operation as sanctioned by the United Nations Security Council. But I repeat, we have to take an integrated approach and overall look at the situation in the region and to connect every effort in every area with the overall objective to avoid the collapse of the state and avoid the collapse of African countries, secular states, and to prevent terrorist forces coming to pound those countries. This is a time bomb which could explode in the future. Russia Channel 24, Elis Romanov. Sergey Viktorovich, you have already mentioned certain cooling in the relations with the United States and Russia, and some say that this reset period has come to a conclusion. What is your view of these relations? Well, we have stated several times, speaking of this computer term, resetting is cannot go indefinitely on. If you need a reset, then it means that something is wrong. When the Obama administration stated that they would like to have a resetting of relations, we took that as their understanding of the counterproductive nature of the policy that had been pursued by the Bush administration previously, when relations between the leaders were quite warm, but that personal chemistry did not spill over to lower levels where practical actions have to be agreed upon. And it was not our fault. We have always sought to build our practical relations on the basis of the atmosphere that had prevailed in relations between our presidents. Therefore, when the new American administration stated their willingness to have this reset of relations, it was up to them, and they took active efforts to promote new approaches. The atmosphere changed at all levels of our interaction, bilateral interaction. We established the Presidential Commission. We signed a treaty on the limitation of strategic offensive arms, and the Treaty 123 has been ratified by the Senate. That has been long dusting on the shelf in the Senate. An agreement was concluded to facilitate the visa regime, and many other things were done. Cultural ties have been developing actively. Last year, we marked the 200th anniversary of the first Russian settlement in California. In other words, cultural life, by and large, has been quite active and intensive. Of course, there are continue to be certain irritants in our relations, and what has been mentioned is major such irritant, but we are in favor of continued dialogue, although our American partners, when they speak in favor of dialogue, they establish certain realities. They plan to build their missile defense facilities on a global level without taking into account what we are saying. They agree to maintain and continue our dialogue, but at the same time they do what they have already decided to do. And they did that through adopting certain decisions within the NATO. But of course, apart from missile defense, we have new irritants, including the Magnitsky Act. The human tragedy has been used very cynically to punish Russia, to interfere in a process dealt with by our justice system. So the American legislators assumed the role of judges in questions that have to do with our domestic internal life. It is up to us to sort out things domestically. So we had to react to this accumulating heap of irritants. We were forced to do so because things like that should not go unresponded. Now we are witnessing a new sharpening of situation due to the unlawful decision by the American law on Schneerson collection that has nothing to do with justice. This is a collection that is a legacy of the Russian people, and it is being regarded as the property of American Hasid community. And by the way, the Hasids themselves received several books from that collection on a temporary basis for a couple of months, and they have not returned the books that were given to them as a goodwill gesture by our side. And this has to be regarded in the court. We understand that the American justice system is independent, just like in our countries, but the administration, the U.S. administration, said that they agree with our position, the Schneerson collection, but they have done nothing to explain to the court the real situation, and the court of law took its decision with a very weak position as voiced by the American administration. Now we will insist on specific steps to be taken. We have to react, and all these things do not add anything positive to our relations. Again, they are not in the best of shapes, but let me say that despite the difficulties and problems, we intend to go ahead in the areas where our interests coincide, and whenever we disagree, including the cases that I've referred to, we have to look for ways to prevent these problems from poisoning the entire atmosphere of our relations and prevent us from cooperating further. So we will continue to resist attempts to interfere in our internal affairs, to lecture us, all the more so since those who try to lecture us are far from being irreproachable. But of course, we will not take the position of someone being offended and hurt and refuse cooperating in other areas. In Los Cabos, our presidents, Putin and Obama, agreed that it is time for us to take particular attention to encouraging trade and economic ties and investment projects. The volume of our cooperation in that area is lagging behind our cooperation with European countries, with China, and is far away from the cooperation that the United States has with Europe and other countries. So I think that this will be a major test if we will prove to be able to encourage our business communities to come to America, because when our businessmen come to America, they sometimes feel that they are being maltreated, as was the case with Severstal when they in Detroit tried to open high technology production, and they asked for credit guarantees by the energy agency, but under the political pressure from American legislators, those guarantees were withdrawn. Although several steel companies planned to establish high-tech production that would create new jobs in the United States. So we have to overcome these over-politicized approaches, and we expect that the new administration that President Obama is establishing now will draw proper conclusions from this sad experience and will behave in a way as we have agreed previously, based on mutual respect, equality, and mutual benefit, without any attempt to interfere in the internal affairs of each other. We have some contacts planned, and I expect that during our conference on security in Munich in early February, we will have an opportunity to meet with the head of the American delegation. Vice President Joe Biden is planning to go there, and if we come there at the same time, we will be able to discuss our relations overboard.
Al-Maiden channel, please. Good afternoon, Sergey Viktorovich. In your statement at the inauguration ceremony, US President Barack Obama stated that America is concluded a decade of wars and conflicts and gives preference to political and diplomatic means in settling various international conflicts and addressing problems. Does it mean that new opportunities arise to settle the situation in Iran? And speaking about Iran, do you see any interconnectedness between the developments in the region as a whole, in Syria, Iraq, Bahrain, with Iran's interrelations with the countries of the region and the countries of the Gulf and Turkey? Regarding the statement made by President of the US on the conclusion of a decade of wars and conflicts, I can say that I welcome this statement if it means the cessation of addressing conflicts by force. Indeed, I think everybody got assured that these methods create only additional problems, multiplying crisis situations where infiltration of violence is expanding. I welcome the need expressed by him to be guided by political methods in settling crisis. That's our approach as well. And if United States come to such a conclusion, we can only welcome such developments. We would be ready, as I've mentioned it, to coordinate our actions with the United States in conflict settlements in various regions of the world. And if we are guided by the identical principles, the denunciation of wars and promotion of peaceful political means, then thus we could create a solid basis to continue such a coordination between Russia, United States, and other leading powers of the world. Regarding the Iranian issue, we've mentioned on many occasions that the attempts to convince in the need of the forced solution of the Iranian problem, the attempts to prepare strikes against Iranian nuclear facilities and infrastructure as a whole, are tearing a destructing path. And we really hope that these ideas will not be implemented into the reality. The majority of the countries of the world stick to a similar approach, to say the least, and we really hope that we will be able to prevent such a disastrous scenario. Iran is a part of the region. It is one of the most important countries for the region. Without Iran, one could hardly hope to address various issues existing there. Let me remind you that when the United States were in Iraq, and security problems arose for the American contingents, Washington, without thinking twice, established direct contacts with Iran. The same situation happened in Afghanistan when US agreed on certain understandings which were implemented. These were separatist contacts, but Washington never said that one shouldn't talk to Iran. Washington didn't say that when problems for American contingents in Iraq emerged. That's why when our partners firmly renounced the invitation of Iran during our meeting with Syria, we thought that it was a huge mistake. Iran supported the Geneva Communiqué, although it was agreed upon without its participation. And we firmly proposed to invite Iran and Saudi Arabia to the action group gathered in Geneva. However, this anti-Iranian rhetoric prevented us from doing so. It goes without saying that Iran is one of the countries on the shores of the Gulf. And in our relations with the states of cooperation of Arab states of the Gulf, and we met in Saudi Arabia not long ago within the framework of this meeting, we have been putting forth the idea to create the security zone in this region. We've got certain security concepts for that region. We conveyed these concepts long ago to the Arab states of the Gulf. Iranians are aware of that. And what we propose is so that Iran and the Arab states and the rest of the countries of the Gulf, with the participation of the Arab League, UN, 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, and probably some other states, could hold an event kickstarting the process for the preparation of agreements that could build trust in the region and ensure security. Similar to common European processes. Maybe it could remind of such processes because inevitably, if this idea is to be supported, it would include the exchange of information on military capabilities, the invitation to participate in exercises, and maybe certain agreements on limiting arms and reducing arms. This idea is on the table, and we believe that against the backdrop of the accumulated problems in relations with Iran and Arab states of the Gulf, these issues should be discussed openly rather than proposals should be made to isolate Iran, because it would lead to a deadlock. Everybody understands that it will be a failure if we stick to that approach with Iran. So if there is a dialogue, we are ready to assist to other UN Security Council permanent members, the Arab League, and really hope that it will turn to reality. Thank you, Independent Gazette, independent newspaper. Panie Fury, Независимая газета, Sergey Viktorovich, could you tell us about the new concept for the foreign policy? When will it be published, and how does it differ in principle from the previous one? According to the decree as of 7th of May, we were instructed to present the draft concept till the 1st of December. We did so. This draft was discussed with the expert community. A number of political think tanks sent their political proposals to us. We've discussed it at the ministerial scientific community. This concept reflects the need to rethink a number of issues against the backdrop of deep-rooted changes, geopolitical changes evolving in the geopolitical landscape. I've mentioned them more than once, and there are unexpected consequences of the global financial crisis, the changes underway in the region of North Africa and Middle East, and what is even more important, not just the changes themselves, but the destabilizing processes initiated by these changes, the role of the Asia-Pacific region that has grown exponentially since the adoption of the previous version of the concept of foreign policy, and many other things. That's why this draft was designed so that it could take into account all those shifts and turns in our foreign political doctrine. But let me reiterate once again, it is not a new concept, it is a new version of the concept of our country in the field of foreign policy, because the key principles remain the same. They were affixed in the foreign policy concept adopted in the year 2000, and boils down to the need to adopt a pragmatic, open, predictable approach in implementing our foreign policy. We should interact with all states on the basis of mutual benefits, and we should firmly defend our interests without sliding to confrontational rhetoric. All these principles are in place, and they will be used in addressing various situations in global affairs. So the concept has been presented. Now it is under the consideration of the presidential administration. It will be published as soon as the president adopts it. Associated Press, please. Associated Press, Vladimir Ostachenkov, thank you. Tens of thousands of Russian citizens are in Syria. Last night, a bit less than 100 of them returned. The situation continues to deteriorate. Is Russia planning a more large-scale evacuation of its citizens from Syria? Maybe the personnel of embassies could be reduced as well. We didn't start this evacuation, that's why we cannot speak about a more large-scale evacuation. Indeed, tens of thousands of our citizens are in Syria, first and foremost women who got married with the Syrians. Not all of them are accounted for by the consulars, but those who are were informed that if there is such a need and there is willingness, they could join our forces supplying humanitarian goods, which are supplied regularly. More than 1,000 of women expressed their interest in that when the polls were conducted, but at the nearest opportunity, when the recent flights of the emergency services were operated, less than 100 of those were ready to use this opportunity. Regarding the embassies, we presume that right now secondary personnel is not very needed there, which is the case actually. The families left the country long ago because the situation there is quite unstable, but the embassy is functioning fully, addressing the challenges that it is facing. It keeps contacts with the Syrian leadership, with the opposition, and so far we are not implementing any other plans. Of course, we've got certain plans in the same way as we've got plans for any country where the situation deteriorates. But as of now, we haven't been speaking about implementing such plans. According to the assessments of the embassy and relevant agencies here, there is no need to implement such plans. Thank you. Voice of Russia, please. Olga Denisova, Voice of Russia. Next year, the withdrawal of international candidates from Afghanistan will take place. In this context, neighboring Tajikistan is a bit afraid of the proliferation and expansion of extremism and terrorism. Will you help to secure the border by your forces or by the forces of CSTO, or maybe the military base in Tajikistan could be activated? Last year, the decision was made to prolong the existence of this base in the country. Thank you. The prospects of the exacerbation of threats coming from the territory of Afghanistan after 2014 are of concern not only for Tajikistan but for other countries in the region, and it is of concern for us because drug threat and terrorism affect our Central Asian neighbors and via them the Russian Federation as well. This issue is regularly discussed within the Collective Security Treaty Organization at the recent CSTO summit in December in Moscow. Last year, special decisions were made presupposing the rendering assistance to Tajikistan in securing the Tajikistan-Afghanistan border, including the equipment of this border with relevant modern equipment, and assisting Tajikistan, including other areas such as cooperation within the CSTO, between law enforcement, customs, border agencies. It's quite a comprehensive agreement that would contribute to the suppression of the infiltration of Afghan threats to the region of Central Asia and through this region to the Russian Federation. We are not planning the deployment of additional forces as of now. All these measures will be implemented by our Tajik friends. We've got advisors from the Russian Federation present there, and of course military bases present there, which ensure stability in the country, and as part of the military potential of the CSTO. That's why right now there are no plans to actively launch the work there, but it is ready to start working at any moment. Our Ukrainian colleagues, please. Ukrainian Information Agency. Just a moment, please. I would like to give the floor to the Ukrainian colleague. The mic, please. Union Agency, Ukraine. I would like to draw your attention to your national priority in foreign policy, CIS countries. Could you tell us the outcomes of the history of the story when Ukrainian side requires to pay customs duties for cargoes supplied by the emergency services? Was it a unilateral rejection? And the second year, your diplomatic year started in Ukraine. What do you think? What will happen to our countries in the future? The endless talks on gas issues or something more positive and constructive? Regarding your first question and taxation, custom duties collection on the goods supplied for the needs of the Black Sea fleet situated on the territory of Ukraine, you asked whether we are going to unilaterally denounce such payments. The thing is that these duties are charged unilaterally by our Ukrainian colleagues with respect to the servicing of our Black Sea fleet. We are trying to settle this issue. It is still there. We continue negotiating within the framework of the subcommittee on Black Sea naval fleet, which is actively in place and managed to address a number of outstanding issues. This one has not been addressed yet, but we will solve this issue. I have no doubts about that. And withdrawing, revoking unilateral requirements to collect such payments will result in savings that could be used to develop the infrastructure of that region.
Regarding what awaits the Russian-Ukrainian relations, well, we can characterize their substance, their main substance, as you put it, as futile negotiations on gas prices. But actually this is part of our agreements, and the agreements should be abided by. The ministers of energy of both countries, the leaders of the governments, the president, are on those issues, and they do not solve them for utilitarian processes, but in a more broader context, in order to understand how we should strengthen our strategic partnership with the Ukraine. Last year, at the meeting of the Intergovernmental Committee, we signed a declaration on the substance of our strategic partnership, and in the context of this broad horizon, we are considering the practical cooperation issues in energy, not only gas prices, also our cooperation in production issues, and I believe that the richness of our relations will be only enhanced, and the more richer the relations are, the more practical issues are there to be solved. The gas price issue is not the major one is not the most important one, and it has to be understood. And I believe that such understanding is there. And the cooperation of our country is very important in the conditions of highly competitive environment. The competitiveness of Russian and Ukraine industries will raise if we move on the track of mutual beneficial cooperation. And of course, we will participate in the processes of integration in CIS countries. It is natural to use our natural advantages in infrastructure, in logistics, in transport, those advantages that were created when our countries were the part of one state. Thank you. First channel, please. Hello. Is there any new information on the Alexander Dalmatov death case? And probably you will dispel any rumors that there is a letter written by his mother, and it is in the disposition of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And if there is such a letter, did it affect its decision to make suicide? And how do you investigate this? And what measures are taken to investigate the reasons of his death? I do not know anything about the presence of his mother's letter. As all of you, I read his note that he wrote before his death. I didn't see any letters. As soon as we knew about that tragic event, we addressed the Hague authorities and requested the comprehensive investigation of that tragedy that happened in the deportation center of Rotterdam, and the similar requests were addressed to the Embassy of Netherlands in Moscow. Our diplomats are in constant contact with the authorities of the Netherlands, and we are assured that the competent bodies and agencies of the country are sparing no efforts to investigate the reasons of the tragedy. Yesterday I had a talk with an ambassador of the Netherlands, and he assured me that this case is the priority, and everybody is focused on it. And we are in the process of finalizing the documents to return the body to the motherland. And the Netherlands rule presume that this procedure will take 1.5 weeks. This is all I can tell you, and we will insist on resolving this case. Thank you. Kommersant, your question, please.
Елена
Chernenko, Kommersant Weekly. Sergey Viktorovich, last year at the similar conference, you said that Russia would achieve the clearance on the involvement of Kosovo authorities on illegal transplants, will see its end, but nothing was heard about it. What were the measures taken to achieve that goal? Unfortunately, we face the negative reaction from the European Union, who reserved the right to investigate the case, and probably they are even phasing out the investigation. You have mentioned the press conference, and we believe that we maintain the just requests by Serbia, just demands by Serbia. Serbia has plans to table this issue on the Security Council of the United Nations in order to engage United Nations in these investigations. We will support these plans. Well, the question from the group of Azerbaijani colleagues, please. Roman Agaev, Azerbaijanская information agency Salam News. Minister, last year, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and co-chairman celebrated the 20th anniversary of the creation of Minsk Group that is holding the negotiations, and last year, the 20th anniversary, showed that the year was futile in the Armenia and Azerbaijan settlement. Everyone is talking about the will of the parties, but the will of the mediators is not less important here. Why can't we heard any condemning statements that condemn the aggression in Azerbaijan, that condemn the fact that not 1 meter of occupied Azerbaijan territory has been liberated? Why can't we see the resolution of the Security Council demanding the withdrawal of Armenian troops? You have a lot of levers to promote this process, to move this process forward. What will this year see? What are we to expect from this year, given that this year is an electoral one? Second question, Gabalin's radar station. Why do you think Russia and Azerbaijan couldn't come to any agreement on Gabalin radar station? Are there any prospects to solve this issue when probably our leaders meet, or maybe this issue has been shelved finally? The issue was closed finally. We were ready to negotiate, but our Azerbaijan friends decided not to lower the price. We have calculated that the price that our Azerbaijani colleagues offered was an excessive one. That's why the talks are closed. There are activities underway to dismantle the station, and our Azerbaijani colleagues know about that. Regarding Karabakh, Nagorno Karabakh, Russia, being the participant of the group of 3 of the chairman in OSCE organization with France and the United States, Russia is willing to find any solutions to settle this conflict. If anybody wants to draw attention to his person in a public space, of course, he can talk about the demands, about flagellation, about public flagellation, and so on. But if we want to practically solve this question, then we should talk. And this is the position of Russia, France, and the United States being co-chairman. In 2007, these co-chairmen drafted the main principles of settling the conflict, which would be serving as a base for peace agreement. This draft could be the basis for Armenia. It said that, but Azerbaijan said that it didn't serve it right. So the co-chairmen resumed their deliberations. They renewed one of its core principles and presented to the parties. Azerbaijan was ready to take this draft as a basis, but Armenian part said that they were ready to work on the basis of 2007 draft. Then the President Medvedev at that time invited the presidents of Armenia and Azerbaijan at a meeting, and our president said, we have a 2007 draft, which is acceptable by the Armenians, and we have a draft of 2009 that is acceptable to Azerbaijan. What do you think? Does it make sense that we in Russia, within the framework of the common approach, can find something in between 2007 and 2009? And the presidents of Armenia and Azerbaijan agreed. 10 meetings were dedicated to that case between the presidents of Armenia and Azerbaijan. And on the margins of that meetings, Americans and the French were present as a co-chairman. They knew fully about that. And in May 2010, was it 2010? Long time ago it was. In 2010, during the G8 summit, the presidents of Russia, the United States, and France made a statement calling for the presidents of Armenia and Azerbaijan to approve the latest draft of that compromise document developed by the Russian side based on the outcome of the meetings with the presidents of Armenia and Azerbaijan. A meeting was planned in Kazan, and the president of three co-chairmen called for the presidents of Armenia and Azerbaijan to approve the latest draft of the document in that meeting in Kazan. I thought it was a very positive development, but regrettably the document hadn't been approved in Kazan. Probably you know why it happened so, because the parties made public statements. From that time, the co-chairmen do not sit idly, but the contacts at the top level, at the summit level, are not planned yet. The ministers are meeting. The co-chairman offered them some reduced drafts of the document in order to remove the provisions that still arise problems. We are working. Thank you. Good afternoon, Sergey Viktorovich. The Minister of Foreign Affairs has been working industriously on the bilateral agreement with the United States on the adoption of children. Did you think that there would be a total ban at that time? What is your personal opinion on the outcome of that hard work, on the futile efforts of that hard work? Did you try to discourage the leadership of the country to make such decision? You know, it has been a very long work on preparing the adoption agreement. Almost 2 years the American side tried to explain us that they had specific procedures, and the adoption issue is in the competency of the states, and the federal authorities here are limited quite seriously. But we underscored that it was important for us to have a document that would be agreed on the level of federal governments, and we needed such mechanisms that would enable American administration to solve different issues with the state authorities. At last, this agreement had such commitments on the part of American administration. It entered into force last year's fall, and as soon as it happened, we addressed the administration to provide access to a Russian child, Maxim Babayev, who was adopted by an American couple. Both the mother and father were deprived of their parental rights for abusing the child. He was handed over to some temporary custodian, and we requested the access to that child, but the court of Florida rejected our requests, while the administration was just shrugging their shoulders. It is a telling situation, because exactly as the case is with the Schmerson collection, we didn't see any genuine desire to assist us. When the administration needs it, it finds methods to bring its perspective to independent courts even. We know that pretty well. Sometimes it works with the Congress even, so that the Congress listens to it eventually. But in that case, we didn't see any such willingness. We didn't see any willingness either to assist us to visit the ranch for kids in Montana. We have come to know about it accidentally from American media. several dozens of children live there, stay there, who were neglected by their parents, and Pavel Astakov, with our representative from our Ministry of the Foreign Affairs, requested the American administration to visit that ranch. The administration did nothing. Then Astahov and Nedolgov informed them that they were just coming. They came to Montana, came to the gates to that ranch, but they were just drawn out. So what cases we know is just the top of the iceberg. We started to study the system of adoption in the United States, and while there is a huge number of bona fide adoptive parents who granted a real family to our children, there are also many cases which are quite vague and which is of utmost concern to us. Not so long ago, I have to note, Vietnam has denounced its agreement with the United States on adoption because of the fact that there are no legal levers to use towards the administration. So it was quite a complicating factor, and I would like to assure you that the Dima Yakovlev law that has been a forced measure, this law reflects our estimate, our assessment of the situation, of the entire situation with adoption in the United States. We know that American adoptive parents, the adoptive parents of the American children, do not always act properly, do not always behave properly. There are a lot of rejections from adoption, and we, first of all, would like to give our orphans to Russian families, first of all, as it is prescribed by the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. Only when there is no possibility to find a family in his own country, the child can be given to the foreign family. And so one of our priorities of our foreign policies, of our national policy, is to ensure the adoption of Russian children by Russian parents. And we believe that the Convention on the Rights of the Child does not impede our commitments. It underscores that it doesn't impose any obligation on the state party to give its children to foreign parents. It just provides the mechanisms, the procedures of such foreign adoption. So we have opportunities to give children for adoption to other states that are good-willing abiders by that convention. By the way, the United States didn't ratify the convention, didn't sign it. The main reason that American state is their unwillingness to be accountable to other states, members of that convention. It is not the only document that Americans are refusing right away to sign, to ratify. It is the whole range of ILO convention. It is the International Covenant on Social and Economic Rights. But we have a very positive experience with other countries, with Italy, for example. Italy ranks second in terms of children adopted from Russia after the United States. In 2011, the Americans adopted around 960 our children, while Italians adopted around 800 Russian children. And there was any case heard about some abuses of our children in the Italian families. Now we are preparing the similar agreement with France. You see, I agree that if we take pure arithmetics, the vast majority of the children that were adopted in the United States are feeling well. But dozens of cases, some of them are known, some of them are not, show that children become the objects of abuse, of violence. They die in those American families. And this doesn't happen with the children adopted to European families. Yes, we had problems with mixed marriages in Finland. You know that story. But that was not the conflict around the child, around which parent he should be with. Thank you.
Interfax News Agency, please. The mic is off. Sergey Viktorovich, could you please tell us if there is any chance that in the near future there will be negotiations, the group of six with Iran, or if there are some obstacles? And what is your view of the fact that Iran is not allowing IAEA inspector to the Karachi facility? Well, negotiations will take place, I'm quite sure of that. Now we are discussing technical modalities, including the venue for talks, and this is something we don't understand, why such heated debate is being conducted about the place where to hold those negotiations. This is a secondary issue, but apparently some of the six partners have its own considerations. But anyway, as we understand that the group of six, including six directors, will discuss the matter with the Iranian representative. Recently, there was a trip of IAEA inspectors to Iran to agree on the modalities for the discussion of issues that have accumulated at the IAEA, and that give cause to some doubts about military aspect, military dimension to the Iranian program. And the Iranians underscored that they would like to agree on the document to bring the negotiations to a successful conclusion. We encourage them to do that in a speedy fashion and to respond to the international proposals. As I understand, various facilities, including the Parchi facility, visit there is the question is being discussed. And by the way, IAEA inspectors have previously visited the Parchi facility, so there are no sensations here to expect. Thank you. The Estonian colleague. Estonian television radio. At the end of last year, there were talks on the border between our countries, and you said that Russia is prepared to sign the treaty on borders if Estonia does not present any surprises. But what are the major requirements by Russia to sign this treaty? And if the treaty is signed, what are the prospects that have been opened by the treaty for our two countries? Well, this story is a long one, an old, long-standing one. We have been engaged in talks with Estonia and Latvia to prepare treaties on the borders. We had clear understanding with Riga and Tallinn that no historical hints should not be contained in the documents, and the ratification procedure will be conducted without any surprises in the form of references to the previous treaties from older ages. The Latvian side complied by that agreement, but in the case of Estonian colleague, when your parliament launched the ratification of the treaties that have been signed, the ratification resolution contained a reference to the Tartus Peace Treaty, which ran counter to our agreement. Therefore, we had to withdraw our signature to the treaty, and we stated that in order to resolve the border issue, we have to restart negotiations, and our Estonian partners took that with understanding in principles when they received our detailed explanation of the situation, and they told us that they will wait for some time, and whenever the time is convenient, taking into new various circumstances, they would be prepared for the resumption of the talks. We have been waiting and reminded periodically, but last year there was an initiative taken by the International Relations Committee of your Parliament. So our desire has always been present, but the decision that has been taken by the International Relations Committee of the Parliament was the expression of goodwill. Therefore, the contacts have been resumed and they continue. Colleague, I'd like to tell you that we can take 2 or 3 or 4 questions, 4 more questions. The Polish television. Valety Bolga, television of Poland. A traditional question, the wreckage of the airplane that crashed. President Putin said last year that the possibility will be discussed of the wreckage being brought to Poland. And they say that Poland has not exhausted all the legal possibilities for insisting on receiving the wreckage, and then Brussels statements were made about speedy conclusion of the investigation and the wreckage being brought to Poland. Can this process be accelerated, and is it possible to bring the wreckage to Poland before the investigation is concluded? I apologize for raising this issue again, but the investigative commission of the Russian Federation refuses to discuss this matter, which hurts us because other cases are being discussed and interviews are being. Well, I'm not aware of your relations with our investigations committee of the Russian Federation, but let me tell you that we took very close to our hearts this tragedy. You know the reaction of our president and the chairman of the government, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. And we have no desire whatsoever to create problems for the Polish leadership, for the families of the victims, and in general for the Russian-Polish relations. But this is a very serious criminal case that is being investigated both in Russia and in Poland. And according to our rules, as long as the investigation has not been concluded and has not been submitted to the court of law, the evidence, the material evidence should remain with the investigators. The investigation is coming to a conclusion, but it is not over yet, as far as I know. This is nothing unusual because the Polish investigation either is not concluded. But being aware of how emotional this case is in Poland, we suggested to our Polish colleague that we start discussing technical or logistical aspects for transporting the wreckage of the airplane to your country. And such expert meetings have already taken place. And I hope that in the near future we will get some news on this subject. I'm not in a position to comment on this and present some forecast about when the investigation will be concluded, but anyway, we keep it within our view. As regards the statements made in Brussels, well, if this is a manifestation of desire to bring pressure to bear on us, but that's understandable, but that will not accelerate the investigation that is being monitored by present person, and investigators are doing all they can to expedite the investigation, and we are also discussing the possibility of raising a monument at the place of the tragedy with our partners. Sergey Viktorovich, thank you for letting me ask a question. Gatar Vikli of a newspaper of Indonesia recently we have seen certain positive developments in developing cooperation with Indonesia and other ASEAN members. But those positive developments are in political sphere rather than economic. The trade turnover with ASEAN of Russia is over 20 billion, Australia 147, and with China is over 400 billion. And soon the level of 500 billion dollars will be reached in your trade turnover with China. What, in your view, should be done to do away with this imbalance? Perhaps a free trade area should be established with ASEAN, as is the case in your relations with China. I hope you can tell us what Russia expects from APEC summit in Indonesia later this year. As regards ASEAN, we're developing our dialogue and partnership. We have an agreement on cultural cooperation, economic cooperation. The trade turnover is growing. The figures that you cited are well known to us, and they reflect the historical development of our ties, and I'm quite confident that the volume of our investment and cooperation will continue to grow. Whether we catch up with China, I'm not sure, but perhaps that might happen. We have our plans and we will pursue them. As regards free trade area, for us this is a relatively new form of cooperation. In cooperation with some countries such as Vietnam, New Zealand, and the European Free Trade Association, we are now discussing the possibility of establishing such free trade area. If we succeed in doing this with Vietnam and other countries, we could spread this experience to our relations with other countries. And what was your last question? Well, as regards our expectations of the forthcoming summit in Indonesia, APEC summit, we hope that the trends will continue, the trends that were launched by our chairmanship, and we are confident that continuity will be ensured within the Troika, APEC Troika. The present, the preceding and the forthcoming chairman are cooperating quite well. Naimiti newspaper, Japan. Sergey Viktorovich, Prime Minister of Japan, plans visiting Moscow. And do you expect the territorial question to be resolved and to sign a peace treaty? And in 1992, the Russian side suggested that 2 islands, Habomai Shekan, could be given to Japan. Could that decision be taken and implemented? Well, we are interested in actively developing our relations with our neighbor, Japan. We have done a lot in the economic, in the investment sphere, in the energy field. We have new plans in these areas and they are being implemented. The main thing is that business communities on both sides demonstrate their desire to cooperate, and our 2 governments are encouraging this desire. We are ready to discuss, to continue discussing and looking for resolutions to the outstanding issues, including the issue of the peace treaty, and we are aware of the fact that the former Prime Minister Yoshika Mori, that has been invited by President Putin to Russia, they are old friends. We are aware that he will ask questions about this question concerning the conclusion of a peace treaty. And as you know, the Prime Minister of Japan has been also invited to come to the Russian Federation, and we will be happy to welcome Prime Minister Abe here in Moscow. The question of the peace treaty has long history, including recent history. Our leaders have repeatedly reached agreement to resolve this issue without emotions, without hypo, without fueling public sentiments, and to prepare ground for the resolution on the understanding that these proposals have to be mutually acceptable for the Japanese people and for the Russian people. And this is not an easy task to accomplish. We have to do with a situation that results from World War II, the situation that has been reflected in the United Nations Charter. Therefore, to make further progress, we have to recognize this legal reality and, what is most important, to create favorable conditions to ensure that any difficult issues should be resolved between our two countries. And in order to do that, we have to increase our humanitarian cooperation, trade and economic cooperation, and we also have to develop confidential mutual approaches in security issues in the Asia-Pacific region. We would like to build security in the Asia-Pacific region not on the closed blocks, but on the security architecture that would be inclusive in nature, include all the states based on the equal and undivided security. And the richer relations between our countries are, the easier it would be for us to deal with any complicated issues. But of course, our cause is not facilitated by the statements made by certain Japanese politicians, emotional statements that formulate unilateral requirements or demands. We don't regard these statements as being useful to developing favorable atmosphere in our bilateral relations. Two more questions, please. You have been waving your hands so actively, so please, your question. Newspaper Chas from Latvia. Sergey Viktorovich, my question is as follows. Latvia and Russia have been developing economic relations, but against this background, the political dialogue is lagging behind. What sort of action both sides could take to encourage this process?
You know, probably you're referring to the fact that in relations between two countries, political agreements are achieved when relevant proposals are made. We contact with my colleague on the sidelines of various meetings, Russia-NATO Council, meetings between Russia and the European Union, and I do not see any reasons to artificially exaggerate our relations, because our relations are quite normal. We interact actively. We remain convinced that the Latvian state should move more to address the problems of our nationals. That's the problem of Latvia, the problem of the European Union. The leaders in Brussels should be ashamed of their position when, in retaliation to our calls that Riga meets the recommendations of UN, Council of Europe, say that they've got their inner understanding that everything is all right in Riga and in other states. It cannot be the case. It cannot be the case when hundreds of thousands of people are deprived of citizenship when they are born in such countries, and during referendum for independence they voted for independence, and when they want to be full-fledged citizens of Latvia and Estonia, and their votes are taken into account during the elections in the European Parliament, whereas they're deprived of the right to vote even at the level of municipalities. A couple of years ago, when Mr. Zaslis was a president, I went to Riga and we called upon implementing at least such a part of recommendations of international structures referring to the autonomous granting of citizenship to newly borns and to the elderly. It seemed at that time that we came to a certain understanding. I know that the Latvian leadership tried to formalize such ideas, but nothing has changed since then. That's why this problem has a negative impact on our relations, and it does give honor to Latvia as a member of the European Union in the same way as it does not give honor to the European Union itself. Our Korean colleague, please, the floor is yours. And after that, there will be the last question. Good afternoon. Korean Information Agency YANAP. As you know, today UN Security Council adopted a resolution with respect to North Korea, which launched missiles in December last year. How would you comment on that event? And the second question, not long ago, a new leader was elected in Korea, Ms. Park Geun-hye, who is willing to expand relations with neighboring countries, including Russia. For more than a year, a new leader has been governing North Korea. Is Russian leadership willing to meet the heads of two Korean states? Thank you. It will depend on the willingness of the leaders of the two Koreas to meet. We are ready to cooperate in the implementation of trilateral projects in the field of electric power, in the field of supplying gas, construction of Trans-Korean pipeline, and connecting Trans-Korean railway with the Trans-Siberian Railroad. Substantial negotiations have been underway on a number of such directions for cooperation, but as you understand it, everything depends not on the Russian leadership, but on the willingness on the side of the DPRK and the Republic of Korea. Regarding the launch of a ballistic missile, which became the subject of UN Security Council resolution, our assessments converge with those of other members of the Security Council. It was adopted unanimously, and it speaks for itself. Similar launches, as well as nuclear explosions, are forbidden by the previous decisions of the UN Security Council. And we really hope that our North Korean neighbors would listen to the opinion of the world community and would get back to the cooperation within six-party talks. But to achieve that, they should comply with the requirements of the UN Security Council resolutions. We will do everything at stake to create conditions for the renewal of the six-party talks. Russia heads the working group on peace and security in Northeast Asia within these talks, which is much wider than the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula issue. We've got certain proposals which have conveyed as the heads of the group on peace and security in Northeast Asia. We hope to start negotiations on these proposals, and hopefully it would accumulate a critical mass of mutual trust that will help address the nuclear problem in itself. Now, the last question from our British colleagues.
So we've got two newly elected presidents, President Putin and President Obama, and deteriorating relations, the end of US ID in Russia, the Magnitsky Act, the Dima Yakovlev Act. How important is it that there should be a full bilateral summit between the two presidents, and is there any prospect of one happening soon?
Ну, я уже подробно говорил о наших оценках российско-американских.
I have thoroughly assessed and expressed our assessments of the Russia-US relations. Mr. Obama has invitation from Mr. Putin, and we await the response to this invitation. It was a brief question, and now the last question, please. Щетина Olga, Nova News. There are various processes in Russia caused by such pretexts as Magnitsky Law. According to UN, military and armed conflicts have been reducing in number over that decade. However, the number of information and media conflicts is increasing, and it seems like Russia is lagging behind and losing this battle. Are there any attempts to somehow address the issue of this negative media cloud on the battleship Russia, which is undergoing a difficult path? You're romantic, so to say. Well, you know how media relations have been developing in various countries, and you know how media are used with respect to foreign audience, and that's what your question was about. We understand the importance of this work. The state has been supporting the expansion of our informational opportunities and capabilities, including such channels as Vesti 24, RT, Russia Leon, and the Spanish version of this very channel. Of course, we should do even more in that direction, and our plans include such measures. And I can tell you that even though financial resources are quite limited among RT and Russia Leon, they are successful competitors for English-speaking resources as CNN and BBC and Al Jazeera, speaking about the Arab world. I don't remember the statistic data, but it's quite convincing. And figures there and percentage of audience watching such agencies is compatible. And I hope that other media agencies would do everything so that the actions of Russia, in the same way as those of every other state, are perceived impartially. That's why we meet here, and I believe it is beneficial for all of us. Thank you.